Hey, what's going on, everyone? Trevor here from the Formula Podcast, ready to bring you part 3 with documentary filmmaker Vanessa McNeal. If you haven't listened to the first 2 parts of this interview, check out the show notes for links to those. You want to check those out before you listen to part 3. In part 3, Vanessa shares her advice for people who are looking to overcome some type of adversity in their lives because, she's had a lot of experience working with people who were victims of sex trafficking, and even in her own life, she's had to overcome a lot of adversity herself. So she gives some great advice and really lays out a path for people to really, even if it's on a small scale, to work through some difficult things. Really excited to share part 3 with you, but let's hear from our sponsors real quick before we get this thing started. The Formula Podcast wouldn't be possible without some pretty awesome sponsors that are willing to support the show. So the first sponsor has been with us for quite some time. That's Lady Boss. They provide women's workouts and health supplements to help women live healthier lives. Now, if you're interested in checking out any of their workouts or their supplements, go ahead and head to theformulapodcast.com and check out our sponsored products page. Now, our second sponsor just got started with us here recently. That's Liquid Web. Now, if you've listened to any of our episodes with like Adrian or Ketsu or anybody that's doing any type of drop shipping or e-commerce, Liquid Web has some e-commerce solutions to help you get a store up and running ASAP. And they were willing to actually give 33% off to people who listen to the Formula Podcast. So when you go to liquidweb.com and check out their products, make sure and type in Formula 33 when you check out to get 33% off. Big thanks to them for hooking us up and keeping this show rolling. That's all from our sponsors. Now, let's do this thing. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of stuff. And I didn't know this before we sat down, but you're working on a book now.
I am.
All right,
I'm very excited about it. It's called Journey Mercies.
Okay.
And it's a self-help book told in form of a memoir. So my story, and it tells my story, but it talks about how I was able to get to a place of healing. And I did that by practicing compassion and mercy. So that's like the essence of the book. And it basically tells us, there's like different steps, like acknowledging, first acknowledging what have we experienced, how has it impacted and affected our lives, and let's just like sit in that. Let's not like gloss over that, like let's sit in it. And then, other steps are compassion, not just for the other person, but for ourselves. Because my whole life I spent like was self-sabotaging and injuring myself because other people injured me. Yeah. And so compassion, mercy, that's another step. And then the last step is forgiveness. And once again, that happens on a number of different stages and processes over time. So I'm so excited about the book, and hopefully by the time everyone watches this, we'll have a publisher and we'll have a release date. But I think that it'll be a breath of fresh air for people. I think it'll be a tangible, not just a story, another sad story, but just like, here's how you find peace and healing and forgiveness in your life.
Yeah. The first point you made about, you said sitting in it, that's, I think that is, for me, whenever I make a mistake or something happens or a traumatic experience takes place, or I'm, frustrated, feeling upset about something, spending that time to sit and think, and I usually journal and like go through it. It's usually one of the most beneficial things I can possibly do, but I also avoid it like the plague, because I know it's gonna be painful. Right. So I can't imagine how hard it would be for someone to sit and do that. What advice do you have for someone to just take that initial step, to spend that time alone, whether it's with a journal or just thinking about their traumatic experience?
You have to do the hard work. A lot of people walk to the well of healing, but they don't drink from it because it's so hard. That's why people, the avoiding behaviors, like turn to alcohol, turn to drugs, turn to sex, turn to whatever that may be to cover up like that's a symptom of a bigger issue. Because it's easier to do that than sit in it and ruminate with that. So the advice that I would give is that you have to do it. You have to do the hard work. Time doesn't heal. Like that is the most BS thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do the work, it will never go away.
Yeah.
If you never do the work, it won't get easier. Sure, time will create distance between that and the, you now and the incident, but that doesn't change it.
Yeah.
Like people have to know that they're responsible for their own life and their healing. And if they want that to be changed, then they have to do it themselves.
Right.
Like no other person or nothing can do that for you. It's like you work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like time plus work equals.
Totally.
Yeah.
Time and work.
Yeah, so do it over an extended period of time and then healing takes place. Okay, so what was the second step that you said?
Compassion.
Compassion. So walk me through that. So you've got this information now, you've kind of been processing things. Walk me through compassion.
So compassion for yourself and others. So for others, you're going to step into their suffering and ask yourself, why would they do what they did to injure me? And you might not even have the answer or the right answer, but just kind of brainstorm and say, like, hurt people. So what happened in their life for them to injure me?
Yeah.
And compassion for yourself for all the things that you might have done to deter where you want to be, because we all do that in various ways.
Self-destructive behavior.
Totally.
Yeah.
And still sitting in that and acknowledging that, and then having mercy.
Yeah.
So mercy is basically not doing what you could have done to that person. Whether that be your boyfriend or your husband cheated on you and you could have burned down their house or whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Like, have mercy on them, not because they're deserving of it, but because you deserve peace. And mercy wouldn't be mercy if someone deserved that. And then you get to forgiveness.
Yeah.
And that's like freedom. That's overcoming. That's with all of those steps combined, being able to say, I'm going to let go of this. Doesn't say that it was okay. It doesn't mean that it will never hurt. But it's like letting go, and that's being free and not thinking, well, what would have happened if it didn't have happened, or wishing it would have, coulda, shoulda, woulda, all of those things. Like, nope, you're letting go of all of that and you're finding freedom. Yeah. And that formula in my brain leads to healing.
Okay. So when you say forgiveness, I instantly go to like, oh yeah, well now it's okay, right? And I think that's where a lot of other people go, even though logically I know that's not what it means, and then I'm like, well, no, I don't want to do that, right?
No.
So what do you say to those people that are like, well, I don't want to forgive them because that means it's either, like, you covered it a little bit, that it's either okay or I have to have this person in my life again.
Yep.
What do you say to those people?
Forgiveness is not reentry.
Yeah.
Because I forgave you doesn't mean that it's so. Just because I forgave you doesn't mean that it's okay. And that definitely doesn't mean that I have to have you in my life. If it's not healthy for me, then it's not for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you have to tell yourself. I forgive my perpetrators, not because it was okay, but because I deserve the peace and the happiness, and to be in a place in my life where I don't have to constantly relive what I've gone through. And some of that will still happen. Yeah. Like I said, the forgiveness will just come and it will go, and you have to do it over and over again. But it's not reentry. It's not saying it's okay. It's just granting yourself release. Yeah. And like a pardon, essentially.
And this is maybe a bit of a difficult question, but
I love hard questions.
I'm assuming this has happened to you because a lot of these people are family members. When they want forgiveness from you and they want to re-enter your life and you don't want that, how do you handle it?
I've had to experience that several times. And I just, once again, remind myself that forgiveness isn't re-entry. So if it's not healthy for me, if that relationship isn't serving me, then I have to cut the ties. And I think that in this society, we've created, like, just because you're family with someone, that you have to have a relationship with them, and that's not true. If it's not healthy for you, if someone is injuring you, then you don't have to take that. Yeah. You choose your friends. And if your friend wronged you, you would cut the ties. I didn't choose my family, but if they're hurting me, then they're no longer in my life, and there should be no guilt and shame around that, because I operate in a way of health, and if it's not healthy for me, then it will be removed.
Yeah, and it sounds like values as well. It's if they respect your values, then then it's a healthy relationship.
Totally.
But once that respect for your values goes away, it's kind of like, well, they're also, by not respecting your values, they also have made the choice to not be in your life, whether they're family or friends.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And a big question that I ask myself is if they weren't my aunt or my sister or my whomever, would I want them in my life? If they weren't family, would I want them? And the answer is no sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's got to be tough though. Sometimes not sometimes. I imagine it's tough all the time when you have to make those choices or have those conversations.
It is.
What advice do you have for someone who has to have that conversation with someone, and they're like, man, this relationship is really toxic for me, and I need to end it. How do they do it?
I think that the process of getting there is difficult. It reminds me of like how hard it is to go to the gym, but once you're there, you never regret going.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I'm like, yeah, I work out sometimes.
No, seriously. So I think that it's similar to that. It's a lot of work, but once again, like, you're in charge of your life. If you want something to be different, that's up to you. And you have to make those active decisions to get to a place of health, just like going to the gym.
I feel like that kind of covers a lot of the big questions that I have. I have a few smaller, easier ones that I usually try to ask everyone. So the first one would be, do you have a favorite book or most impactful book that you've read?
Yes, I love Anatomy of the Spirit by Dr. Carolyn Myss.
I've never heard of that one.
Oh, it's life. I feel... So the book basically talks about how our experiences, how our trauma, how our feelings manifest into different physical ailments, or physical concerns that we have in our body. And she basically just, acknowledges that and then talks about how we release those feelings. It's really, really cool. It's very spiritual, but it's also practical and based in science.
Okay. Yeah, usually when a guest recommends a book, I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. It's on my list somewhere. But
This one's
I've never
an older
heard that
one.
before. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I love old books.
There's so many wonderful stories in it. So she's an intuitive, a medical intuitive.
Oh, okay.
So she's basically able to meet with someone, and after doing her work that she does, she'll be able to say, oh, you have lung cancer, and here's why.
That's so bizarre.
It's so crazy.
Interesting.
But
I didn't even know that was a thing. So, 2 more questions. One, if you had to go back to a specific point in time, maybe, whenever you would have needed some advice the most, or someone to be there for you the most, if you think back to who you were at that point in time, and you could talk to them today, what would you say to them?
I would say that everything is going to turn out fine, and everything is going to make sense.
Yeah.
And I would even tell myself that yesterday.
Okay. Last question. For anybody who's listening right now, they've heard your story, the traumatic experiences you went through. They've heard some advice on how they can get involved to help, play their part, or play their role in fighting sex trafficking and these things from happening. They've heard a bit about compassion. What's the final message that you'd like to leave them with today?
I would encourage people to support my work, because there's so much wealth in that. Like, if you want to learn about male sexual violence, screen the voiceless in your community, screen the voiceless in your college class. If you want to work on more like self-healing, watch my story on YouTube or watch some of my TED Talks. But I think just educating yourself, your community about these issues, and everybody has a part to play in making it better. So I would encourage people to do that.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap for this show. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Trevor Carlson, and I appreciate you taking the time to stop by, and whether it's viewing our episodes or listening to our podcasts or reading our blog posts,
all of you guys really help keep this show going. So I much appreciate your time and attention, and hopefully we provided a little bit of value for you. Now, if you're interested and you think you might enjoy getting some blog posts, emails, other podcasts, guides, any of that sort of thing sent to your inbox every week, go ahead and head over to theformulapodcast.com and sign up for our email list today. That's a wrap for this week's show. Thanks again, everyone, for stopping by, and I look forward to you tuning in next time.